The whole point of shame is that you feel worthless, like you just feel like you are wrong. So to move from that place to get into a place where you can say, I love you, you've got to bring that shame out. I think one way of doing that when you're in that place is if you can find a good friend that you can do this for each other and say, you know, I want to have a conversation about what it's like, and all I want you to do is repeat that back to me. Don't fix it, don't reflect on it, because anything you say, when I'm in that shame place, it's gonna feel like a judgment. Even if you say, I'm so sorry you feel like that way, it's like, oh, I shouldn't feel that way, that's what I'm hearing. If someone is sharing, I feel so worthless, and the other person says, I hear you feel so worthless. That person starts to feel witnessed. Shame, doesn't survive when we start to bring it out and to share it. Because shame is all about isolation and encouraging isolation. And when you start to connect, it's bringing that out.
Imagine carrying the weight of expectations, silent struggles, and the pressure to always have it together. The Dad Project is a space for open, honest conversations about men's mental health. Raw, real, and long overdue. In Season 2, we go deeper, sharing powerful stories and fresh perspectives from those who've lived it and those who help others through it. Filmed at the Old Court in Windsor, this season is about breaking stigmas, redefining strength, and starting conversations that matter. I'm your host, Naroop Juti. Let's talk. So Jacky, when I first met you, we were actually upstairs in the theatre, and I was behind the camera and you were reciting this beautiful poem about addiction. And I remember listening to you because I saw a therapist being so emotionally open about her views and opinions on addiction, and in such a beautiful way. And it really kind of took me back, so I thought, what an amazing way to express how you feel about this topic. And from that point on, I knew we had to work together. The Dad Project wasn't even a thing then.
Wow.
Right, it wasn't a thing, but as soon as I created this, I got in touch with you and said, look, we need to work on this.
Yeah.
And obviously I knew I had to have you here, sat opposite me on the podcast. So why don't you just tell me a little bit about yourself and your journey and how you found yourself in this amazing position where you help people through your experiences and your therapy.
Thank you. Thank you for that lovely reflection. I really appreciate that. It's funny, isn't it? As soon as we start being asked, tell me about yourself, because I can tell you all the things I do. But I think my I amness is about noticing. And I think I reflect that in the work that I do. So I reflect it in being a poet, and I reflect it in being a therapist. And I think I've always had this sort of drive about understanding other people's untold stories. I'm really noticing those. I know a few years ago I wrote a whole series of stories called Fake News Fairy Tales, where I told the story of different characters in the fairy tales. So like the mattress seller in Princess and the Pea, because the Princess and the Pea story doesn't exist without the mattresses, right? Or the cobbler in Cinderella, because without the golden slipper, So I think that's who I am, is someone that notices and is always wanting to bring out those stories for people so that other people notice what's going on as well.
That's really interesting. So you noticed these stories, and I found I do that quite a lot. I notice stories, I notice things in people. And I think that's a learnt skill. Because for me, because a lot of time I would have conversations with people and they would say something, but was I really listening to what they were telling me? And over time, I've realized that, working in men's mental health and in this space, when I speak to men, I try to dig deeper. Like, they might say something to me, but what are they really trying to say?
Is that because for you, that was your experience?
I think, yeah.
Yeah.
I think because with men especially, we say something, but what are we actually really trying to say? A lot of the time they say, with women, they say, if a woman says, I'm fine, it means she's not fine, right?
Yeah.
But I think the same applies with men. They say something, but what are they actually really trying to say?
Do you know, I had a row with my husband this morning, perfect timing. And we spoke on the phone whilst I was in the car driving here on hands-free, obviously. And we were sort of laughing about it. And I said, I need to understand your language, because I think actually when you were getting angry, what you're wanting is for me to come closer. And we were laughing because he was like, that's exactly it. You know, that's my way of getting closer to you, is by being angry.
Yeah.
And I think I'm really interested in the idea of frustration, because I think when we're frustrated, we can take different tactics.
Yeah.
And being a poet, I rhyme these. So I think we can either blame, we can self-shame, so we make it all about us, or we can like up our game. So we do the same thing, but we do it harder. And I think that comes like from what we learn as kids. We'll deal with our frustrations in one of those three ways. We might mix them about a bit. And so when he gets bigger and he's kind of like, I'll make you see, or, you know, or what it's like, it's really a reflection of that's being amplified. And I think that can be so helpful when we're looking at communication. It's about, okay, this behavior is showing me something underneath where there's a need. And if we start looking at behaviors as unmet needs instead, that can really open up conversations.
So if a man, and it's funny to talk about anger, because I was actually talking to my cousin last weekend, and he said, when something happens, I just get angry. Like if my child hurts themselves, I just get angry. The first thing is that I get angry. Why did you do that? So, and a lot of men tend to do that. Is when something happens, anger is the first response. Is that down to, like you said, maybe from their childhood having to speak loudly to be heard, or where does that stem from?
So there's different ways that we can deal with stuff as we get triggered or we get upset. So you've obviously heard, I imagine, of fight and flight, right? But we can also freeze. We can fawn, which is when we appease and we kind of lean in, or we can flop, where we just kind of give up. And I think part of it is learned behaviour. So what is it that we experienced around us? And part of it is what works when what is my environment like that when I do this kind of behaviour, I actually kind of get like a reward for that. And for different people, it's called like a window of tolerance. I always use my hands for this. So if you think like, people can have a very small window of tolerance where they ping off into fight and flight, or they ping down into freeze pretty quickly. And, working in therapy, what we're trying to do is expand that window of tolerance so that people don't ping off into anger or rage, or like I go into freeze. That's kind of my go-to, which is really difficult in relationship. If you've got one person that's going into anger and the other person's going into freeze and withdrawing, like that's a difficult dynamic, because as this one's approaching, this one's getting further away. So what you have to do is understand the discomfort underneath, and have a conversation from that place, which takes work, but it's possible.
Yeah, that sounds like a hard dynamic to kind of manage.
Yeah.
How do you increase that tolerance? Because I know through my relationships, I believe I suffered from something which I termed myself as like emotional fatigue. Like I only had so much I could give. And when I moved past that point, my responses weren't what I wanted them to be, but I didn't have anything more. I felt like my bucket was empty.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
My emotional bucket, and I needed to fill it up. And when it's at the top, you get the best version of Narup.
Yeah.
You're like kind, all those things. But when it's empty, I need refilling. So
Yeah.
if you ask of me, you're not going to get the best of me, because I'm dehydrated. My emotion, I'm dehydrated.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that a real thing?
It's a total real thing. And what you're talking about really is like that emotional resilience. So you've got that flexibility, right? And depending upon so many things, your history, whether there's trauma in your history, your genetics, your attachment style with your family, with your caregivers, with your parents, all of these things contribute to the amount of resilience. Neurodiversity, all of these things contribute to the amount of resilience that you have. And then I think the other thing is about resources. So how well resourced can you be? And again, environmentally, if you've got a roof over your head and you've got food on the table, they're resources that you can, you get a good night's sleep. They're all resources that you can pull on. And I think it's those two key things, like what is my resilience like and what resources do I have? So to build that resilience, I think the first thing is to notice. when does it ping? So when do I ping off into my fight flight system? And when do I ping into or down into like the freeze stuff? And start to really explore that. So what is triggering me? What is that? Something that's current? It's probably something to do with your past as well. What does this situation, this present situation, remind me of from my past? And what needs there didn't get met that I kind of need to address in some way? And so, some of this can be grief work, actually. There's where I didn't get my needs met. And people, I think, certainly in therapy, they'll really struggle because they'll say, I had a great childhood, I had great parents, they met all my needs and stuff. And we're not talking about the macro scale. We're talking like on the micro scale, that there might be a certain time where something happened and you didn't quite get the emotional attunement that you needed. And that's still reverberating, that's still feeling wounded. And so when someone comes and pings on that wound, it's like an emotional bruise that's been banged,
I love that, because I know so many people said the same thing. I'm fine, like I had a great childhood, nothing really happened to me, but I know that's probably masking something else, right?
Yeah, I think it's that sense of feeling disloyal. And I kind of say, you wouldn't be here if everything was okay, right? So we kind of, yes, I understand you want to, get across that love you have for those people and remain loyal to them. But there's also about remaining loyal to yourself. And there's a part of you that isn't feeling felt, isn't feeling witnessed, isn't feeling calm. And what does that part need? What does that part want to say? So we can acknowledge and be grateful for all of the great stuff. And still, because we're very messy human beings with all of our human tricky things, we're not going to get it right all the time.
Yeah, right. For men, how does a man know when he needs help? Because what I find with men, sometimes they don't reflect too much openly about how they're feeling, but they're carrying stuff.
Yeah.
So what are usually the signs that a man will show that they need help, that they may not recognize themselves?
I think what do they find themselves medicating on? So I think there can be three things. Are they feeling isolated? Do they feel quite emotionally like dysregulated in that, when they're driving and someone cuts them up, they absolutely go in a mad rage? And how are they trying to medicate themselves? How are they trying to numb themselves out? Are they scrolling? Are they shopping, using porn, drinking, like all of those different things? When it's getting problematic is when there's harm being caused to yourself or to others, when you're really thinking about it a lot and it's starting to take up a lot of your mental capacity, when you're sort of sensing some kind of withdrawal from it. So when it might even just be like you get agitated when you can't, have that thing or can't numb yourself or soothe yourself in that way. And what it's helpful for them to work towards is, how can you soothe yourself get that emotional regulation in a better way? How can you feel seen so that you can feel witnessed? And I think it's also about a sense of safety as well, and feeling safe around the people you're with and safe within yourself.
And what does safe mean? Because I often talk about this, like men need a safe space to talk, right? And I tend to say that a safe space is free of judgment, right? That if a man was to open up to somebody else, they don't feel like they're going to be criticized or condemned or to feel like they are weak in any way, because men want to feel strong. I can handle it, I've got strong shoulders, I can do this. But a safe space for me is a place of vulnerability where you can be open. What would you define as a safe space?
I had a therapist who I learned from on this, and she said, rather than safe space, let's talk about a brave space, which is really what you're talking about, because that's where you get to show up and go, I don't know, I don't get it, I'm going to fumble here, I'm going to make a mistake, and there's no judgment in that. It kind of actually can be like, thank God I'm not the only one. Me too, I haven't got that figured out. And that's what I see in men is the real struggle to surrender, because even that word surrender, right? Like you think of war and the idea of surrender, it's being weak, it's giving up. But I think it's actually about acknowledging what is. It is what it is. And rather than fighting against the I need to be strong, being able to kind of find a space to say, I don't have the answer here. and I've tried this and it's still not working. And now I'm scared because those things that used to work aren't working for me now. And that's where I really see the change, when men can actually manage to reach that space. But that's so tough because culturally, socially, that is not a space where men get to inhabit.
Why is that the case? Why has our society evolved like that? Because surely it doesn't serve us well. But why has that happened, in your opinion? What have you seen over time that has made men become like this?
I mean, I think if you go back to what we were saying about like the nervous system and going into fight, flight, and what gets passed down, we learn and absorb so much from what we're around. And this is why, when people talk about how important trauma healing is, it's not necessarily for the individual, but it's for society at large. Because if you've got all of these different people pinging, then they go into certain roles. This is what you find in dysfunctional families, is that people will take on a certain role. So there might be like the hero role or the scapegoat role or the lost child. And because the system becomes bigger than any individual, and the system is, we're just trying to get through this day and, keep calm and carry on kind of a thing, And so we end up taking on these roles. And I think the idea of breaking out of those roles is one thing, but actually doing it is another thing, because you do get mocked, ridiculed, questioned by people within your system, because the system becomes stronger than the person. And so it's challenging. It's very rewarding work if you do it, but it's challenging.
I love this idea of roles that you said.
Yeah.
Because I often hear that, what role does a man play? Men don't know their role anymore.
Yes.
Society says this, society says that. What is a healthy role for a man?
Oh, gosh. I think it's to show up as a human.
What does that mean?
I think it is about, how can I connect with you on my feelings and needs level? And where are the spaces where I get to do that? Because some of those roles are still traditional roles, right? There's still the provider and the nurturer.
I think they're good roles.
Yeah, I mean, but it doesn't mean that you want to be 100% provider all of the time, or I want to be 100% nurturer. Like there's multiple parts to us, and how do I get to be and express and share that part, which is the resources element, so I can have the resilience to show up in this way. And I think sort of the clarity of communication, like that argument with my husband this morning, we're right back in it, we're right back to where we've been in the past. But to actually kind of go, okay, I'm gonna bring in curiosity, I'm gonna bring in humility, even though I really don't want it, even though I really want to win this argument and prove, how wrong you are and how right I am, I know that doesn't get us anywhere. So I don't want to armor up in that way anymore, because it's much nicer when we're connecting on a emotional level, because that's where you get to play and be creative. And, you can't have all of those lovely things while you're trying to defend yourself and prove and,
What is the best way? Because you're talking about arguments, and obviously this happens in relationships a lot.
Yes.
Where a man will try to come in and fix it. Right, okay,
Yes.
right, what do we need you to sort this out? And the woman's like, no, just hear me.
Yeah.
Just listen to what I'm trying to say. What is a healthy way to argue? Because they're going to come, and they are important, because I heard this on a podcast where it's not a bad thing to argue. It's about how quickly can you get back to a baseline. And if you can get back to that baseline quite quick, it shows a healthy relationship. Because these challenges, especially if you're in a relationship and you're still working stuff out and you're not married and you're going through early stages, arguments are ways to understand each other. Oh, this happened last time and she didn't like it, so I know in the future I'm not going to do that. Or he didn't like when I did this, I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen because his feelings are important to me. So those challenges actually create strength, right, within the relationship. But what's a healthy way for...
Well, there's quite a few things. And I always say things like that. I go, quite a few things, and then I remember one, and then I can't remember the rest. So let me try and remember what I want to say on that. The first thing, I'll tell you like what we do in our relationship, which has helped. One of the first things we agreed was saying, is this a get it or a fix it? So when a problem is presented, actually, what do you want from me? Like, what are the expectations here by you sharing it? It can feel really clunky at first, but it's the willingness to clunk your way through it. So I think that's the first thing. We also had to come up with we identified certain points where that were not helpful. So we had little code words. So we've got time crunch, which is one of us is, I always used to do this, right? I try and set myself up for a time to have this conversation, and it would always be just as he was walking out the door, right? And so we have this agreement now where if one of us is under pressure, we'll just go time crunch. And the agreement is, this is not up for discussion now. It's not a good time to discuss. He has feasting. He doesn't want to talk about certain stuff when he's eating. I have landing, which is when I come in from being on holiday, I need some time to kind of recalibrate and have a bit of space for myself. So it's, I mean, we're 20 plus years married now. So I think there's also kind of having that experience is definitely a benefit. So I think there's those things, but then I think it's also, you're both 100% for your 50% of the relationship. So if I find myself above a 5, so on an emotional scale from 0 to 10, if I'm 5 plus, one of my emotional bruises is likely to have been touched upon now. So I need to take some time out. So this is what I work with clients. It's called like a diffusing process, where you say, I need to take a time out. I need to go and reflect on this for myself. Like, what is it reminding me of about my past, about my internalized messages? I'm not good enough. I need to, I need to man up, whatever it is. How am I bringing that mentality into this? And again, coming back to what actually do I feel about this, and what needs is it? I always think that feeling is a brilliant signpost for needs. Yeah. Like what needs are there underneath that I need to be addressing? Do I need to be addressing those, or do I need to bring them to the partnership? And if you can agree for both of you to do that, that can be really helpful. I think another thing is agree that there's intruders in your relationship, right? And there's hot topics. So intruders can be things like in-laws or homework or all of those things. And then hot topics are things like money and sex, that that they're going to be difficult conversations. So acknowledging that that's going to be the case, and then saying, well, let's set aside a time to actually discuss that, and let's arrange a way that we're going to discuss that. So I'm not going to roll my eyes at you when you ask me how much I've spent, because that's passive aggressive behavior. I'm going to answer that honestly, and then, and vice versa, and coming up with those things that, what do we identify within our relationship that push the buttons, and what can we do to stop pushing those buttons because it's not helping?
Yeah, I think being mindful of the other person's state of being is really important when having arguments, because I read this thing where a lot of times couples have really deep conversations late at night, right? Yeah. When they're lying in bed, and it's like a phone battery. Their battery is close to zero. Yeah. They've had a long day. They've been to work. They've come back. They might have had kids, and they've sorted the kids out. Now they just want some time to chill. And now you're going to bring in this heavy conversation. Yeah. Especially for men, you're going to ask the man something really heavy. Yeah. And where's the battery? Where's the energy? I haven't got the energy.
Exactly. So recognizing that and acknowledging it, and saying, you know what, after lunch on a Sunday is when it's a good time. And we have an agreement that no heavy topics after 9 o'clock at night. Yeah. Because you just don't want to take that into the rest of your evening, or wake up with it as well,
What I'm hearing from you is that the relationship takes a lot of care and planning to manage it, but a lot of people don't do that. They'll talk about it on the way to a party, or after a party on the way back, when maybe in the back of the cab, then they're a little bit drunk, right? And now they want to raise something up, and you really have to plan this stuff out. And I love the idea of that, because it shows that respect. Yes. And I'm a firm believer that make sure that person is in the right frame of mind to be able to handle what you're going to talk about, and that shows care. Yeah. But what I've found sometimes is, if a man was to say that to the woman and say, look, I'm not ready to have this conversation right now, right? It's not dismissive that I don't care about how you feel, but there's stuff that I have to process and deal with and manage, and I haven't got the capacity to give you the respect and the time to handle what I know could be a challenging conversation. Yeah. And I've known through friends and other relationships that sometimes a woman can take that as a sign of rejection, that you don't care. You're being dismissive of my feelings. Yeah. Because I want to talk about this now, but all these other things are so important to you. Or is your football more important? Is it? And a man's not trying to say that. He's just saying, these are the things where I'm at emotionally. and I just need to process this and have my time with this, and I will come back to you on it. So how would a man handle that situation? So I know it is quite common, and it's natural for the woman to feel like it might have been on her mind for a couple of weeks already, and now she's got the courage to actually talk about it.
Yeah.
And he's just said, not yet, I've got this, that, and the other. But he's obviously dealing with his stuff. So how do you navigate that situation?
Well, I think there needs to be a dual agreement that you're both committed to the relationship, and you're both trying to show up in the relationship imperfectly. You're doing that imperfectly. And I think, it's always coming back to that idea of I'm committed, but I don't have, again, that resilience or resources right now. But I think you frame that beautifully. You're saying like, I totally get you want to talk about it, but I haven't got the capacity to now. It is important to me. And I think one thing the guys can do is then say, let's set aside, let's put a date in the diary that we're going to talk about it at this time. So giving that certainty of this is when we'll discuss it and this is when it will get addressed, it can help to alleviate that sense of abandonment that can come for the woman. But I also think it's really tricky for men, because what are you doing there? You're actually being vulnerable, right? You're actually saying, this is what it's like for me. And women need to appreciate that, right? That, okay, I need to, I'm not, if I don't appreciate this right now, then you're going to get worn down in that, and you're not going to come to me with those vulnerabilities. And that's, that's really important. Yeah.
What are some of the key challenges you think men face based on the work that you do? Are there certain key things that you're noticing right now that are common across men of different ages? And
I think there's obviously in my experience, because I work a lot with addiction, I mean, obviously there's a lot of medicators going on. So there's a lot of what men are using to not be in touch with those feelings because it's too hard. So I think that's the first thing. I think there's also a lack of education around emotions. From very early on, young boys are given those roles, like who's the sporty kid, who's the brainy kid, like those kind of things, right? If you don't fit into those kind of roles, there's that sort of sense of identity where, who am I and how do I exist in this world? And I think that can be a real challenge. I've 3 now young men going, they're all adolescents now. I'm talking to them, with social media and all of the talk about toxic masculinity and I think it's, like I said before, coming together as humans. I think there's great strides in things like the Me Too movement and things like that, but that can't all be centre stage and then shove people to the other side. What needs to be understood is that things like the Me Too movement is an issue for both men and women. And how can we work on that together rather than the finger pointing and the blaming? So, there's some of the key things. I think also, like I said, around that whole educational piece around emotions, like when I'm working with guys, sometimes they're so numbed out. So they might stop medicating, but they're not in touch with what's going on. So I'll say to them, well, just start, literally put it, like, get your phone, get an alarm 3 times during the day. When the alarm goes off, note down how you're feeling, what's going on, what contributed to that feeling. How did you know you were feeling that feeling? Where did you feel it in your body? There's a great Finnish study, which is about all human beings feel emotions in the same place. So, might you feel pride in your chest, you feel shame, like the flame of shame down your back, right? How can you get in touch with those physiological things that are going on that can help you to be more informed about what's going on for you?
Is that the best way to understand your feelings? Because I can imagine if you said to a man who you said is quite closed up, write 3 times a day your feelings, what kind of words are they going to use? Anxious, tired, stressed out, annoyed? Like, what are the kind of words a man would use to describe feelings? Because I can imagine the vocabulary being really limited.
Yeah. So there's a great feelings wheel you can get that actually it's literally like, these are all the there's 87 different feelings that we can have. Wow. And most people can name 3, right? That's research done by Brené Brown, which is why I wrote a whole series called Permission to Feel, going through all of the different feelings. But so, what I did with one client recently, totally shut off. I said, next week, come to me with a music list. Come to me with your playlist and communicate to me through the songs that you connect with. And we listened in the session. We listened to a song, and I was like, God, I feel that here. Where do you feel it? And it's like, yeah, what? And then he, said where he felt it. What what does that connect with you? Well, actually, this song, it really helps me get in touch with my melancholy.
Wow.
You hadn't been able to, use the word melancholy before, but those things can evoke different feelings.
I love the idea of music as a tool for expression. I've never heard of that. And I listen to a lot of podcasts. I've never heard anyone use that method. And I can imagine men do need different ways to express how they feel. Music, it could be
rap.
Everything, right? Yeah. And I know I do the same thing. When I'm reflective, I'll listen to like love songs or slow music. Or when I'm feeling good, it's like going to the gym. I'm like, okay, I need to get a good session in. Yeah. It'll be some hip hop. And so what other tools can men use if they're like trying to understand themselves apart from the music? Is there anything else they can do? Because you can imagine when someone's feeling good, they want to do stuff probably that's a bit more active, right? And when they're feeling sad, they probably do stuff which is a bit more isolating, like sit at home, just put a movie on, turn the lights down low. What other things can they do to try to find ways to understand their feelings? And how can they become aware of them? Because I think that's really important, that I am doing this is making me feel like this. Are there tools that a man can use?
Well, I think anything where you're connecting with your senses, it starts to bring in an emotional response, right? Because emotions are like energy in motion. So we, you know what it's like when you see a sunset, right? You go and see it's an amazing sunset and you suddenly start to feel awe. And then how have you experienced that sunset? Well, through sight, right? When you smell something, like the olfactory system is the oldest system. It's instant kind of memories come back. So those feelings of nostalgia that might come up when you smell something. Well, what's that like? So I think it's not right. Okay, I need to get down my notebook and I need to figure out my feelings. And it's like, just how am I experiencing life? We have become so distracted from our own experience that we aren't in touch with where we feel discomfort, where we feel joy. It's all getting numbed out. And so I think it's how can I put those distractions away and sit with whatever starts to come up. And I think the challenge for men is they want to fix it, right? It's like, oh God, I'm feeling this but I love that bit. I really think there's real treasure in the discomfort, right? Like I know that if I'm really and this is why I love writing poetry, because it helps me. You can use poetry as well. I mean, that's another thing. But as I write something, and that starts to evoke feelings, and I can write what I like to call the shitty first draft, like really just get it all out, no censors. And that can bring some relief. And then I have a chance of reflecting it. I'm saying but guys can do this, right? Then you can have a chance of reflecting on it and seeing what else is there. But you got to get over those defenses, right? Because that's if guys really want this, then they'll do it.
A couple of things you said there were really powerful. This idea of distractions. And I've felt that too, right? That if you remove distractions and really just sit with where you are, you'll find that the answers everything is out there, it will come to you, but you have to completely and actively remove it. Like even going for a beautiful walk.
Exactly.
Right? Just really being present and thinking, I'm here right now. It's a beautiful day. It's not raining. The sun is shining. The birds, I can hear the birds chirping. And how does that make me feel? And what am I experiencing through this moment? Rather than just being bombarded with stuff online and really just filling up your mind, because we have a finite amount of space in our brain for our experiences throughout the day, right?
Yeah.
And so you're just getting clogged up. And I think men need to be able to do that and stop trying to find a solution for something, and it's allowing and trusting that a lot of time the answers are in here, right?
I think that's absolutely beautiful and so spot on about trusting.
Yeah.
And really, how can I trust in myself, and how can I trust in life? How can I trust in myself when I don't have the answers? How can I do that? That is a real challenge.
And you're completely right. And I say to men a lot of the time, your body and your mind knows what you need. It really does. But have you given it the space to speak to you?
Yeah.
And this idea, and I bang on about this, be your own best friend. Like the world, no one's going to come and help you. Even a therapist won't be able to help you unless you allow them in.
Yeah.
Give them the space, but be your own best friend. Have a conversation with yourself, right? Talk to yourself. the mirror test. Tell yourself, I love you 10 times. How many people could do that? Look at themselves. It's quite a challenging thing to do.
It is.
Even when you're by yourself.
Yeah.
Look at yourself in the mirror saying, I love you, I love you. It's like, whoa.
I've written a poem about how hard that is to say affirmations.
I want to get into your poetry in a second. But this sense of loving yourself and being your own best friend, because the world isn't going to help you and no one is going to help you unless you first help yourself.
I think the real challenge in that is the idea of shame and internalized shame, and how, you know, when we internalize shame from either overt or covert messages that we've received, to actually believe the whole point of shame is that sort of toxic shame is that you feel worthless, like you just feel like you are wrong. So to move from that place to getting to a place where you can say I love you, you got to bring that shame out, which is it's literally like feels like your skin is off. You know, you're so raw. And I think one way of doing that when you're in that place is if you can find a good friend that you can do this for each other, that's in that brave space, and say, you know, I want to have a conversation about what it's like, and all I want you to do is repeat that back to me. Don't fix it. Don't reflect on it, because anything you say, when I'm in that shame place, it's going to feel like a judgment. Even if you say, I'm so sorry you feel like that way, it's like, oh, I shouldn't feel that way. That's what I'm hearing. Whereas if someone is sharing, I feel so worthless, and the other person says, I hear you feel that worthless. I hear you feel so worthless. That person starts to feel witnessed. Shame, you know, doesn't survive when we start to bring it out and to share it. Because shame is all about isolation and encouraging isolation. And when you start to connect, it's bringing that out. And also, you're talking about something called co-regulation then, which actually affects your vagus nerve. Your vagus nerve is the major nerve that tells you whether you're safe or whether you're threatened. And when we have co-regulation, so talking, connecting, live, you know, eye contact, all of that helps to sort of be in our ventral vagal state, which is this connection, this co-regulation state. And that is the state that we're in when we're in a place of safety. So that helps to calm everything down and to feel like everything's okay.
I was just imagining two men talking and sitting, because that's powerful. Because I remember when I did that mirror test, when I said it to myself, I was actually on a call with one of my friends, and he's a life coach. And I was going through a moment where I needed to work through something. And he said, turn around. So I've got a mirror right behind where I work. And he said, tell yourself I love you 10 times, right? And this is before I'd really got deep into the work that I've done and into the Dad Project. And I said, okay. And I started doing it, and my whole body filled with emotions. And by the fourth time, I think I was crying. But it was his voice in the background saying, you're okay, carry on. And if his voice wasn't there, I would have stopped.
Yeah, he's just being with you, right?
Yeah.
He's just being present with you. He's not opposite you.
No,
he's
being present.
alongside.
But that was a power move for my shift, for me. It was massive. Because every time I've done it after that, it's fine. But I had to break that. And there is stuff that I feel shame over in my life. Not because of what I have done myself, but what I've experienced and what's happened to me as life unfolds.
Yeah.
And being okay and owning that and loving that I've been through these experiences. A lot of them I couldn't control, right? But they've happened.
Yeah.
And how have I processed it and how have I moved on?
Yeah.
But allowing it and really speaking to myself. And this is why I say to people, and sometimes people might think I'm conceited or big-headed, but I say, I love myself. I love who I am so much. Not in an egotistical way,
no, I get
but in
that.
a way of pride, because no one's known my journey.
Yeah.
Right? And I've walked this alone.
And you haven't got to loving yourself through luck or through, it's through commitment, right? Commitment of being present with yourself.
You're right. And I listened to this, I heard this quote, I made a video about it. It said, thieves never rob an empty house. So when life is giving you challenges, it's because you're worthy of so much. There's so much inside you that's challenged you. Work through it, work through it, work through it. I'm challenging you to make you better, stronger, 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 stronger. And so if you take and you welcome each challenge as a way to build your strength, not harden yourself, not put on armor so nothing can hurt you, but build through it, is amazing what you can achieve.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's the journey that I've been on. And what I love about doing this work that I do and meeting someone like yourself is the man I evolve and become into. I feel a massive energy rush. Like I'm a big energy guy. So even from you now, I feel energy coming. And you're reaffirming things and thoughts I've had already. And making me feel even more certain that the path I'm walking down is the right path.
I mean, I've listened to, episode of this podcast, and what I absolutely love about it is what a role model it is for what healthy masculinity can be. Like there's so much talk about toxic masculinity and everything, but what we're not seeing is the open, vulnerable conversations man to man. And I think that's just so needed. And so I absolutely love the work that you're doing. I think it's brilliant.
Oh, thank you. One thing I want to touch upon with you is your work in addiction, right? And also your poetry, which is how like I said, I first met you.
Yeah.
Addiction's a big problem.
Yes.
Okay. And a lot of men, understandably, when they're going through a difficult time, what is their response? I don't want to be in this. I don't like this state. I don't like this. Please take me out of it. Let me get drunk. Let me use drugs. Let me watch porn. Let me go gamble. Let me do whatever I need to do because I don't want to be here. Here is a bad space. I want to be here. But really, they know they need to always go back there. Because if they don't go back to that space, address that, work through it, then it's just a vicious cycle. And they'll spend their whole life going round and round and it will never end because they can't escape. And I always say, wherever you go, there you are.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
Wherever you go, there you are,
that
right?
Too, yeah.
So tell me about the work you do in addiction. How can a man, I know it's very broad and it's a lot of work, but generally, what can a man do just to initially just maybe break the habit of it or try to do something just to take the first step away from it into a healthier space? What would you say?
I think it's recognizing that it can be a stumbly journey. So when people are addicted, there's often all or nothing thinking, right? So you try something and that doesn't work. See, that doesn't work. I'm going back to using this. And recognizing that, it's actually done a really good job. Like people don't use those things because they're rubbish. They do what they're wanting them to do, right? They numb them out. They make them feel better. I think sort of acknowledging that, and if I carry on doing this, it will, if it's not already causing harm, it's going to take me to a place where progressively things get worse. The people I work with, they've lost their family, they've lost their homes, they've lost their jobs. It's just devastating, and it doesn't need to be this way. And that's why I really encourage people talking about this because it's because of the way it's been done in the DSM, which is a manual for how we talk about mental health disorders and all of that sort of stuff. It was talked about as being a personality disorder, or there's so much stigma around it that people don't want to talk about it or admit that it's an issue. But 1 in 3 people are affected by somebody's, and that's just the substance use. I mean, when you look at the stats around porn and things, like it's massive, it's everywhere. And so you're not alone in struggling with this, but actually if you can get curious about another way of being, it can be a real invitation, because all addiction is saying to you is you're in pain. Yep. That's what it's saying. And you've looked for a solution in a certain place, but that solution's, its days are numbered.
But how do they become curious about something else? Because a lot of the time they're so far down that road.
Yeah, well, not everyone does, to be honest. Like that's not everyone does. And often it's when circumstances are quite dire. And it can also there's a whole family system again around those people. So often people, their loved ones might try and rescue them from that behavior. So they might call up for the person and say, oh, well, they're ill today, they can't come in and work, where actually they're too hungover. Yeah. So I think it's also families being involved, and rather than them trying to rescue that person from the consequences, actually, how can I not do that? And that is really scary.
So you mean what? Let them be, or?
Well, no. So every addiction has consequences, right? Yep. It starts small. It starts with someone having multiple hangovers and not being able to go into work. It might be multiple parking fines, or car tickets and things like that. And all of these things start to add up. And this can be the really tricky thing, because it's such a gradual process that loved ones might be helping here to kind of alleviate the pain of the consequences. And then consequences get bigger, and then they're having to do more to alleviate those. And so until the person with the addiction actually is in a place where they have no choice but to see the impact of their behaviour in a negative light, it's very difficult for anyone to get curious, because you're either running towards pleasure or you're running away from pain, right?
That's actually quite scary for the family, because I remember listening to an interview with Gordon Ramsay, and he was saying that his brother was a drug addict and he's tried so many times, rehab, paid.
Yeah.
It doesn't change. And so here's a man trying to help, and he's got financial resources, right?
Yeah.
But he can't, because I guess his brother's not ready, and it's difficult for a family member.
Well, it changes the brain as well,
Yeah.
right? You know, I mean, they've done research on that, and certainly if you're using substances. So it's difficult. But sorry, I interrupted you.
No, it's fine. It's difficult for the family, because in Asian culture especially, and I know it's probably in all cultures, but being Indian, alcohol abuse is a big thing. And especially because there's an Indian term which says, you know, man up. Like if you go for a jog, man up, you know, have a whiskey. Man up, come on, let's just drink. What you're really encouraging bad behavior, right? And I've seen that across the board. I still see it now. Yeah. And it's really hard for me to witness it, because I'm like, you're doing the wrong thing, but it's not my place to say it.
Yeah.
You know, and I can understand.
But what you can do is take care of yourself. And this is a really tricky thing, because by you having sort of boundaries and saying, I'm not okay with that, and so I'm going to take care of myself by either not being around that or leaving early or whatever, that is all you can do. But then what happens is you start to get reactions from people, because you're not playing along with that dynamic. Yeah. And so there's nowhere for that energy to go other than back to themselves.
And that's difficult, because I can understand that, but then that person can be perceived as being selfish, because if you say, no, I've got to take care of myself because I can't be around this energy, some people might say, well, you should care. That's your brother. Why are you doing that? Why don't you care? But it's difficult, because you're right. That person's energy can then disrupt someone who's trying to live a very healthy, mentally, physically, a healthy life.
Yeah.
And I can imagine that, you know, it's a difficult thing to say, I have to let you be. But you're saying that is the best solution. And I also agree, because I say people tend to change when they feel the heat or they see the light.
Yeah. Well, it's very complex, and there's different nuances. Yeah. And I think it's all, you know, it's not about you saying, you know, good luck, get on with it. Yeah. I mean, you can offer interventions and support, and, you know, I had someone I was working with, and for a long time they'd come back. I'd see them on a weekly basis, and they'd lapse again, and they weren't really. And I said, you know what, this isn't working. What you actually need is someone on a daily basis where you can have accountability. That person's now got a year's sobriety tomorrow.
Wow, amazing.
But it's like it's about, you know, it's not seeing that person as being a terrible person, or what they're doing is terrible things. Is they're in pain, and all I can do is offer up, these are some solutions to alleviating your pain, but actually that choice is yours. And the issue with addiction is it's almost like this condition of no choice. I don't have any other choice than to drink or use. I've had a bad day, I'll use. I've had a good day, I'll use. You know, because when the emotions are going up and down, whatever it is, I need to numb out, and that's the way that I do it. So it's really, really hard for the family member, because when they reach that point of, I have to, you know, push back and the consequences be what they will be, they really understand the hopelessness of the situation if that person doesn't decide to pick it up. And so a lot of people would rather deal with the familiar disruptive lives, because at least it feels like there's some sense of control in that, even though there isn't, but it's familiar, and that's where the sense of control comes from, then go, I'm going to take my hands off this, and I'm going to trust that things will work out as they need to be. Because, you know, there's very, very serious consequences to this. People do die, you know, and don't find recovery.
I've found some people that I've met who've been addicts, right? I've spoken to them, and they're such kind, sweet, amazing people, right? And I find it hard to imagine that they could be addicted, because I've talked to them and they're just, I feel a big sense of love, but what I also see underneath it is self-hate.
Well, I think what if these people are so sensitive in the world, are so attuned to the world, that they can really end up feeling that pain, and there's not a place for them to be able to share that pain, or for it to be, going back to that idea of witness, for it to be witnessed.
Yeah.
That's kind of my experience working with people, and all the people that I know, is that there is a real sense of love, and it's almost like just an openness to life.
Yeah, I can understand that.
But you know, when a lot of the times, I mean, there's arguments over this, but I'd say every one of the people I've seen is when there's addiction there, there's trauma there.
Yeah.
You know, where they have felt isolated, they have, you know, something dramatic has happened that they haven't had the resources to deal with, and that's what they're battling against.
So tell me about your poetry, because the first time I heard you was you were talking about a poem about addiction.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear how you got into it. And you were telling me the other day that one of your poems got published by the BBC?
It was on BBC Radio.
Oh,
so
amazing.
yeah, I've had they've picked up 4 of them now. So
That's
I'm really
amazing.
excited about that. But yeah, I did one on Father's Day actually.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, I've, for as long as I can remember, always written, and I wrote quite sort of lyrically with a lot of metaphor. And I remember when I was about 11, actually, I had to write a rap or write an anti-drugs thing, and I decided to write a rap.
Oh, nice. I want to hear that. Yeah.
And so I think it started there. And then for me, it's been such a place. I used to have a diary when I was a kid, and I wrote in code. And that's the best way I can describe it. So for me, writing poetry is like a grown-up code. So I can share a whole poem with you about an experience that I've gone through that you won't even know what that experience is. So I can get to share vulnerably without feeling exposed. And that's what I love about it.
Wow. That's really interesting. Okay, I never thought of it like that. But what is that? So that's what that poetry does for you? It allows you to express your emotions?
Yeah, I think, like I said before, sort of noticing, it helps me to make sense of the world. It helps me not to feel as alone. Like I can, I remember during COVID, it was such a uncertain and unpredictable time, wasn't it? And I thought, well, I'll write something to help me through it. And I remember sitting down thinking, I don't know what to write. And so I started with the line, "Once upon a time." And then a whole poem came out of that about, once upon a time was a washed up hag, her face all raw, her boobs all sagged. Happy ever after, her faithful beau, exposed as a fraud, it had all been for show. And it was like this whole idea of kind of like, the world's all kind of topsy-turvy, and where do we go from here? And so I think it's just this place that you can be in, that you can really be in.
I find writing is very important for me, but also because I work in visuals, right? I've been a filmmaker and a photographer my whole life. So when I create these reels and these little films, that's my equivalent of poetry, because I'm expressing myself. And there's certain things I might do that no one will notice, but for me, it's a release.
Yes.
It's a release of emotions. And I actually get a lot from giving, you know? So I could put something out and it's for the whole audience, but really it's kind of for me too, right? It's like, I need to hear the words of myself, because we all know stuff. We all know advice. Whether we action it all the time is a different thing. And we all can make mistakes, and we'll make mistakes. That's what makes us beautiful and human, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And we're all imperfect, and that's life. I'd love to get your thoughts on the Dad Project, right? Because sat opposite you is a man who's dedicated to changing the way men see mental health and the way they express themselves. And you've known me for a little while through different stages of my life. What advice would you give me in terms of what I need to do, how I need or should be, and what I need to reflect for men to see in me being a role model and the founder of this organization?
I think you're doing it, to be honest. I think we pick up on an embodied sense before anything that's said. And I think, you really have that embodied sense of being authentic to what you're putting out. And I think, there's that sense of humility and curiosity, like we were talking about, and feeling free. Like this, I don't sense that sort of defensiveness, feeling free to share, in a considered way that feels appropriate and right for you. And, you know, I know that you're sort of pulling in different people and seeking advice from that. A friend of mine says, you know, my greatest strength is knowing my weaknesses. And I think that's a lovely expression, that actually knowing where it might not necessarily be your area of expertise and bringing different people in. I think the thing that I've realised is that a lot of people can be watching without you realising.
Yeah.
You know, and they can be taking things. And so you're never really going to know the full impact of what you're doing. But it is about showing up, isn't it? And continue to do that because it feels like a life purpose. Yeah. I think it becomes quite spiritual, actually. You know, like, actually, this is what I'm here for. And actually, it's just my job to turn up and do it. And I have to let go of control of how far that goes. I can put all the work in, but actually, this is me trusting life, that this goes where it needs to go, to the people it needs to go to.
One interesting thing that's happened through the content is the female audience is massive.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of the messages I get are from women. I was not expecting that. What's important is the message gets to men too.
Yeah.
Right? Because we're going to start our meetup group soon. And so we want men to come to talk. Why are women so drawn to these conversations, do you feel? And what would help men to be more open to listen? And obviously, having worked with so many clients, how do you find, or what does it take for them to make that step to come and see you?
So I think as far as the women go, I think women are more accustomed to pain and acknowledging pain and being in pain, you know, from having periods to childbirth to all of those things. So for a woman to say I'm in pain isn't as challenging as it is for a man. I think there's something in that. Often when I'm doing work with guys, is I sort of apply to logic. So I'll use sort of frameworks and say, okay, so you're here, like this is the research or this is the evidence on this, and this is, you know, this is what's going to work on this is what not. So I think, you know, it's a bit like, let's build a flat pack, right? You want to build it. These are kind of instructions. You can decide not to do that. That's fine. But like, this is kind of what has been suggested and what has been proven to work. That can be a real in. And I think there is also that, I think when it works most of the time is when there isn't that pressure. So all I'm doing is I can offer you this as a way of living, being, you know, working through your own stuff, but it's totally your call. You have autonomy in that.
Yeah.
It's back to that idea of choice. When everything has felt so constricted and there is no choice, and you're actually offering someone saying, well, there is this way, but, you know, and then if they're like, well, I that's not for me. Well, what are the hurdles to that? What are the barriers? Why would that not be suitable for you?
One of the things I want to do with the meetup groups, and we've talked about how we can work together on that, is to have different types of meetups, right?
Yes.
So there'll be men only, but I like the idea of being a couples meetup where the woman can say to the man, look, I'll come with you.
Yeah.
Again, just a bit more safe space. There's someone there. And then also having these monthly, like, come and meet the community kind of sessions in London where if we're not doing any work, there's no one doing a talk, is everybody in a room, I do a little introduction, welcome to the Dad Project community, you know, and everyone just mingles and talks. And so a man can come there, he'll meet a few people, and he'll think, well, there's some guys here that are like me. No pressure, removing the pressure, letting them know it's a brave space, like you said, a place where they can feel at home, a place where they've got people who are similar to them. Instead of saying, all right, come sit down, get in a circle, tell me about all your feelings and emotions. I think that is way too far for a man to go initially. So the ideas we have with the meetups is gradually, kind of like holding your hand through it until you get to a space where you feel like, okay, this is home for me. And that's what I want to create, is a home, a community. Is that a good way of doing it?
Well, there's a really nice sort of technique that you can use, which is called sociometry, which is like where you say, okay, this is a line 0 to 10. put yourself on the line of how comfortable you feel right now. Okay, everyone's like down at 0 and do not feel comfortable. So then you're like, you feel like that too. So when you were saying, but how do we talk about feelings without, we're talking about feelings without talking about feelings. This is your experience. We've got a shared experience. That's something to connect on, and you can do that for different things. Who's struggling with being a dad? Like, where are you on that? Who loves talking, who hates, and so then you've got that space of, I'm getting to be in amongst it. I'm not being observed, but I also get to observe others, but no one's actually the observed, you know what I mean? Because we're all in it together. And that's what can kind of create this brave, safe space that here we are all sharing a little bit of ourselves that feels vulnerable, but doesn't feel exposed.
Why do you think, when I say to a man, it's a sign of a strong man that they're vulnerable,
Yes.
that they're open to do this.
Yes.
Why is that a strength?
Because you're not defending yourself. And defenses mean that you're hiding yourself. And I think when you're vulnerable, what you're not doing is hiding. What you're doing is saying, there are these parts of me that I struggle with, that I like, that I dislike, that I love, all of these parts. I mean, this makes up who I am as a human. And that's a real strength because, the Dad Project, to go as a dad to your kids and be this open person, what a role model. That kid doesn't have to, what you're teaching that kid is, I don't have to sequester parts of me in order to be accepted. I get to show up as who I am. I don't have to adapt anything. I just get to be me. There's no other demands on me.
I think that's a very brave space for people to say, I am me. This is who I am. I don't have to be this person or that person. I'm just me. Like, either love me or you don't have to, but I'm okay with that. I've learned that actually later on in life, that we're not meant to be friends with everybody.
No.
We're not meant to, because, a lot of people please.
Yeah.
And especially as I was growing and developing and working through my insecurities, I would always want to be liked by everybody.
Yeah.
And if I didn't, I'd go home and think, why didn't that person didn't chat to me well? Or I tried. I asked all these questions. I know I'm good at conversation, but they just weren't answering, and they were looking over my shoulder and wondering who else to talk to. What did I do wrong? And I quickly realized that, you're not meant to get on with everybody. If you do, then you're not authentic because you're not who you are, because we're all different.
But it's so fascinating as well, because the times where I can totally relate to that. I was a total people pleaser and have lost a lot of friendships along the way, because actually what do you attract? You attract people that are attracted to people pleasers, right? And I think it's sort of being your authentic self is refreshing, because the only person you've really got to please is yourself. And I can immediately imagine you're going to say, but doesn't people see that as being selfish or whatever? But there's freedom in that, because what you're saying is this, maybe please yourself is the wrong sort of expression, but being yourself and saying, this is the way that I am, it is freeing. But also I know in my experience, when people have been upset with me, it was not on my radar. Like all the things that I was busy trying to kind of take care of and make sure they wouldn't be upset, that they got upset about something totally random, which I had would have no idea about. So that's the other thing, is that it can feel this sort of path to nowhere, because you're trying to please everyone, but you have no control over whether they're pleased or not.
It's true. And I actually think being authentic and being yourself is actually a really attractive quality. Yeah. People can see it straight away. This person is very confident in of themselves, and they are drawn to you because a lot of the time we're just hiding. Yeah,
well, again, you feel safe, right? If someone is being authentic, it feels safe, because you're like, I'm getting to see, yes, okay, you might be annoyed or you might be sad or whatever, but I'm getting to see you as you, so I know where I stand with you.
Yesterday, one of my cousins actually said to me, Naroop, when I look at your content, I see you, right? And that might seem like a simple statement, but a lot of the time we look at people's content and we think, that's not what they're like. They're not like that. They're just putting on a show, they're putting on a front. He said, I see you. You're the same in front of the camera as you are sat opposite me now. And for me, that was a massive achievement.
Yeah, it really is.
I'm just me. Yeah. And if anything, majority of my life before, I probably wasn't me. I was trying to be something else.
Yeah.
You know, I always talk openly about my challenges of how I felt inferior and how I felt I had to be someone else. And at 44, right, I am now the truest version of myself. And I'm proud of that. So that's why I try to help encourage other men and say, look, I know how you might feel because I've done all those things.
Yeah.
I put on all the masks. I try to do this and none of it works. Just be yourself.
It's exhausting.
It's exhausting. It mentally, emotionally, physically, it drains you.
Yeah.
What is one thing that you think we haven't spoken about as we near the end of this conversation? Something that you think is really important. You know the work that we're doing. You know our audience. What's something that you think people should know or is often not spoken about?
I think stuff around as adolescent boys, actually, and how we can help them. I think they're the first real generation that are coming through with all of the impact of everything being so available online and all of that information coming to them. And they need strong role models. They need to know what good looks like and how do we support them? Because, you know, we know suicide rates are worse amongst men, amongst young men. How can we support them as they're coming through?
How do we support them? Because part of what we're doing with the Dad Project is going to be like a school store. So the idea of dad is every man needs a dad as a role model. A lot of time now, that role model has now just vanished or is weakened or is not even present. And you're right. We know that the younger generation needs a positive role model and we want to try to encourage that. So what would they need? How do they need to see this role model?
I think they need presence and I think they need people listening to them.
Right.
Rather than them being told what to do or that we have all the answers. We don't know. We don't know what it's like for them, you know, and just hearing them and them feeling like they have a place to honestly share that. I really struggle with some of this mental health stuff that's in schools about, you know, teaching other kids to be good listeners and encouraging kids so you just need to talk. That's not always the answer. You know, a lot of people are not good listeners. A lot of people will try and fix. A lot of people will kind of put labels on things. I think, how can we go in there and say, share with me what your experience is like. You don't want to talk about it? Okay, how do you want to share it with me? Do you want to make a playlist? Do you want to draw a picture? Do you want to write a poem? How are you going to express this? Yeah. You tell me.
I think that's true with children, like with my daughter. She will never just say, I love you, Dada. Like, she's 9, right? She's going through a stage where she's finding herself. But the love she has for me is boundless. I know I can feel it, but she says it in different ways. And it's up to me to understand. I want a simple, I love you, Dad, hug. She is trying to understand and navigate life and understand her emotions and the influences she's having. But she will show me love in her way and is being open to seeing it, picking up on it and understanding it. And you're right, it's finding these ways for these young men to be expressive and not forcing them down a very strict kind of path.
Yeah, and I do think it all comes down to listening and how can we create a space for them to have open conversations. I remember when my eldest, I think he had a mobile phone and I was saying, I think the thing is, like, I should be looking through your phone randomly at times just to check what's on there and stuff. But it didn't feel good to me. It felt like I'd be snooping, but also it was a struggle because I'm meant to be protecting you. And the conversation we had was, well, I'm going to come across stuff that you know, you can put everything in place, but that's the way things are. But when I'm struggling, I'll come to you. You know, when I'm not sure about something, when I have that icky feeling about something, I'll come to you. And we've had, with all of my 3 kids, we've had difficult, open conversations. And sometimes I'm like, you know what, I haven't got the answer to this, but I'm here with you, just you're figuring it out. And I think it's that sense of I'm not going to be isolated, I'm not going to be abandoned as I show up as myself as I'm struggling through is key.
I think there's so much more. I think we'll probably have to come and do another episode around the whole parenting aspect of stuff, of how, especially as a father, you navigate, you know, that time of because I think as a child gets older, the father's role changes, and a lot of time fathers will treat a young boy especially the same the whole way through their life. Like, there might be a 30-year-old man, they're still going to shout at them and say, why have you done that? You should be listening to that, shame, instead of thinking, he's a man now. I need to allow him to make his choices because he sees the world in a very different way than I saw it when I was 30, you know, and he's navigating himself. So my role is to be supportive rather than try to make him live his life as if I would live his life if I was in his position, right? I think that's a whole separate episode for us to go into. I think there's a lot there for us to uncover. But one question I'd love to ask you as we conclude is, you do amazing work. You're a mother, you're a wife, you help so many people. How would you like to be remembered?
Legacy is something I think about quite a lot. I always have, actually, since I was a kid. And I think I have a poem that ends with, all I ever want to say, all I'm trying to do is encourage you to be who you are, to be the newest you.
I love that.
That's how I want to be remembered. Encourage you to be the newest you.
That actually beautifully kind of summarizes this whole conversation is be yourself. Sounds so simple, but it's actually quite challenging. But I think this conversation, even for me, I learned so much more from you. I love our conversations when we have on the phone. There's always something you tell me. And I'm like, okay, I didn't even think of that. And I'm actually really looking forward to us working together and helping a lot of people. I think there's a good chemistry between us, a good understanding. And I know you've been a support of this since I told you from the very beginning. So
well, thank you so much. I mean, I love what you're doing. It's so needed. I love the openness and the honesty. And the real professionalism as well.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you for coming down, Jacky. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for asking me.